Good afternoon. My name is Randall Brown, and today I am here to demonstrate ratio analysis. The first is short-term solvency. This is used to explain or show current assets and current liabilities, the current ratio, which is shown right here. The quick ratio eliminates inventory, which is a company's most unliquid current asset to its current liabilities, and its cash ratio, which shows the current cash amounts to the total current liabilities. First, Sanderson Farms' current ratio has been stable over the past 4 years. As you can see, in 2014, 13, 12, 11, and 10 all have a relatively stable and high current ratio at 3.46, at its lowest at 2.67. The quick ratio shows that it keeps a relatively more liquid assets to each dollar of current liabilities, especially over the last 2 years at 1.92 and 1.2. For every dollar in liabilities, it has $1.92 in assets. And also in 13, it has $1.20 in assets over $1 in liabilities. And especially in the current cash ratio is very strong. In this past year, it shows that they are able to handle a short-term loan if requested, because they have a cash ratio of 1.12. It means they have more cash on hand than any current liabilities on hand. They have also stable amounts of the past year or two, where their cash ratio was 0.53, which is 53 cents to $1 in liabilities. Now in 2011, they had a low cash ratio, so it says they had more assets, or really more inventory, than they had in cash that year. I'll explain a little bit later on you can see this reason for this amount later in the analysis. Entergy shows a competitive short-term solvency ratios also. The current ratio shows that it would be able to handle a short-term loan, but the cash ratio seems low, like it's not very high. But it does keep it, so it doesn't keep a whole lot of cash on hand. But being that they are a utility company, they're able to pick up their receipts or their receivables, as you can see in their quick ratio, that they have a lot of receivables. So in the end, because they get regular payments from their customers, they should be able to really handle some short-term debt. So I would extend a short-term loan to Sanderson Farms and Energy Corp, more so obviously to Sanderson Farms because they have a stronger current ratio, quick and cash ratio, especially in the last year. But Energy itself has a strong current ratio, and actually a good cash ratio on hand too. It's how much cash they keep physically on hand, and they aren't using it for something else. Now, Global Star, on the other hand, has almost twice as much debt as it has current liabilities, which its cash being on hand is also very low too. So I would not extend a short-term loan to Global Star because of its poor short-term solvency. And you can see this over the years that it's actually been really, really bad. And actually, pretty much their current ratio in 2012, which these ratios look a little messed up according to the Bloomberg lab, but the cash ratio was pretty much their current ratio in 2012. So they have a poor time of keeping assets on hand in comparison to their liabilities, current liabilities. So that's why I would not extend a short-term loan to them. Next, I'll discuss long-term solvency, which is how well a company would pay off debt in the long run. The total debt ratio is displayed as a percentage of debt to assets. So for Sanderson Farms, there are 1.8% of debt to their assets over time, even if their debt increases, they quickly pay off their debts. As you can see, in 2011 from 2012, they incurred more debt, or had a much larger total debt ratio. But in 2012, you see they pretty much cut that in half, and then considerably cut that amount of debt in 2013 and have very little debt now in 2014. So even as you can see in 2011, back in with the short-term solvency, you can see that they had still a strong current ratio, and they were able to recover from that and not having a large amount of cash. But in the long run, or long-term debt, they incurred that, but they were able to pay it off in 2012, and then also in 13, and then now into 14. Their DE ratio, which is the total long-term debt to equity, this shows for Sanderson Farms 2014 shows that 1.11% of their amount of equity is debt, or about 98% more equity than debt. It's another way of saying that. It's the same here, 4.838. So in 2011, they incurred a lot more debt to their equity, so they had more. They had a lot more leverage going on at the time. This will be explained later on too, but they've able to minimize their DE ratio over the years, and they're very stable. And the equity multiplier is also known as the leverage ratio. This is the assets over equity. This is how much a company is using debt to fund its operations. The lower the ratio, the higher the return is to shareholders' wealth. And now Sanderson Farms shows the strongest of the three to handle long-term debt. As you can see, having low debt overall and on their ratios from their balance sheets and income statement. Now now energy keeps a relatively low and stable total debt ratio also. They maintain 31% of debt to their assets. So for every dollar of debt they have, every dollar of assets they have 31 cents thereabout in debt. So they use debt more to run operations, but they're able to maintain their debt, their long-term debt. Now, energy uses debt to magnify gains, and their DE ratio looks high, but their equity is only now for the DE ratio. It shows that in reality they have $1.21 to $1 in equity, and so on. So they do run more debt. So they have more debt as running operations versus shareholders. And you can see that in the equity multiplier here at 4 times more assets than there is equity, but it also means that leverage is being used to earn their income. So in essence, I would lend a loan to Sanderson Farms and Energy because of their stability and low leverage. These leverage ratios are relatively stable across the board. So that it shows that they're not loose and not having trouble maintaining paying their bills on time and their long-term debt on time. Now, on the other hand, Global Star, it appears that their total debt ratio is actually not terribly bad, but they keep half their debt, basically half an amount of debt is to their assets. Now, their equity, you can see that they have 790.26, so 7 times the debt to their equity. So it's not even the shareholders are not earning really anything off of any of their sales, and it's been worse since from 2013, and it got even worse in 2014. Their DE ratio. The equity multiplier, on the other hand, shows also that they did have a low leverage in 2010, 11, and 12. You see a jump in 2013. Not too bad, but 2014 they have 13.5. This is very alarming. Shows that they're in a lot of trouble in maintaining their financials, and so I would not extend a long-term loan to them, especially with their DE ratio being so high. Their debt is already so high, they can't really maintain this very long, or at least doesn't appear to me that they could. So I would not extend a long-term loan to Global Star, but I would to Sanderson Farms and Entergy because of their stability and low debt in comparison to their assets. Now, last, I'll talk about who I would invest with. The return on equity is how much shareholders are earning on their investment in the company. Return on assets shows how well the company earns its profit on its assets. The profit margin is how well a company earns income off of sales. And the PE ratio, or price earnings ratio, shows how well a company earns, or price per share is to its earnings per share. Sanderson Farms shows some instability, as you can see in 2010, 2011 to 2012, and you can see that it's kind of all over the place here. But one thing you will notice is that in 2011, like you had saw in the long-term solvency, they incurred more debt. That's where you can see right here is that they had to extend more debt to expand, but they had more expenses was greater than their net income. So that's where you see this negative return on equity or assets or profit margin. So they had no PE ratio at that time either. But you see that they had a strong, or at least what appears to be a strong return on equity. From the 22%, they came back up to 9.9 on the equity, and the PE ratio at 19.28. So the price per share over the earnings was 19%, which is great on investment. The following year, you can see it follows suit that they had 20% return on equity, and then 30% last year on return on equity. So it shows that they have higher returns, but they are a little unstable with the fact that the market does influence them in some way or another. So that's where like 2011 came about, or I can see or surmise that there had been some market change at that time. But overall, been a strong return from this company. Entergy, however, has lower returns than Sanderson Farms, but still has high rates of return. In 2010, 14%, 15%, down to 9%, down to 7%, back up to 9.58%. on return on equity. The assets have been stable except for maybe 2013. The return on assets 1.69, but last year they are able to really manage the return on their assets, using their assets to fund their operations. The profit margins are actually pretty great, and how well they are able to meet the market demands. And the PE ratio shows a very stable market, so the price per share to the earnings is very strong. So I would extend, or I would actually invest in both companies. First, energy, because of its stability and relatively high rates of return. Now, Sanders and Farms, I would invest because even though they are unstable, or can be unstable, depending on the market, they have considerably high rates of return. Like in last year, they had 30% in returns. So, and also because of their short-term solvency and their long-term solvency, it appears that they are able to, even if a bad year happens like 2011, they're able to recover really fast and regain their returns, or regain their profits in the following years. So this is why I would invest in Sanders and Farms, because even though there's instability in their returns, there is a larger, you're rewarded more greatly as a shareholder because of the market they're in. Now, Global Star, on the other hand, a communications company, they are running a negative, and been running a negative return on equity, assets, profit margins. These numbers show that they are in very much trouble. So even with this DE ratio shows their long-term debt, and shows, even though they somewhat look like they did a good job in 2012 in paying off the long-term debt, they did incur or lost a lot in profit off of their assets, off of sales. So they have actually been running negative income every year, and even before 2010. So this company, historically, I would not invest money into, because it looks like they're not going to be able to withstand the next few years, or be able to pay back any money on my investment. So this concludes my analysis on who I would extend a short-term and a long-term loan to, and why or who I would invest in. Thank you.